Why are COVID vaccines still on the market? Well, because most people believe with religious fervor that injecting something into the body will ultimately create antibodies that will protect them. And until there is a major paradigm shift in the minds of consumers away from that narrative, they will always remain on the market because there will always be a demand for them. For example, if a new scary virus came out of a lab tomorrow that the world was convinced had a 50% mortality rate or more, some people who said they would never get another vaccine would stand in line to get one. Why? Because that injection will create antibodies, just like the science says it will. And the religious but false belief is that the antibodies will protect them. Protect them from what? Getting infected by the new scary virus? That's not possible. The virus must get through the epithelial barrier from the outside to the inside to affect them. The antibodies created from injections are serum antibodies inside of those people, and they cannot stop something from coming through that barrier. They only react to it when it does, and sometimes in ways that will harm people, not protect them. Well, then, you might ask, what can stop something from getting through that protective barrier? Mucosal IgA antibodies can, but you must experience a natural infection to get those special antibodies. A shot will not produce those antibodies. That's a fact. The problem is that most people are afraid of natural infections because they hear that scary 50% mortality rate number. Well, what does that number really mean? It means that half the people who develop severe symptoms will die. Who's going to get severe symptoms? Certainly not everyone who gets exposed and infected. It's the people who are immunosuppressed that will have problems. An example I like to give is a rabies infection that supposedly has a 100% mortality rate. The fact is, there are unvaccinated people who have developed antibodies against rabies and never even knew they were exposed. Let that sink in. But some people will say, I'm still afraid. I don't want to get infected to secrete my own IgA antibodies. Isn't there something I can do to prevent the infection from happening? Indeed, there is. It's as simple as clean water, fresh air, rest, exercise, diet, and sunshine to keep that mucosal epithelial barrier strong. Or you can rinse it if you are concerned that something might be stuck in it that could get through it. Here's another idea. Instead of wasting billions of dollars on vaccines that cannot prevent infections, we could research and develop products that can use safe peptides that mimic human cellular receptors that viruses use to attach to cells. These peptides can be safely applied to mucosal surfaces in various ways. The peptides are not toxic, would not attach to human cells, but will attach to viral proteins before they attach to epithelial cells, therefore preventing the infection from happening in the first place. And some will say, well, those methods are not foolproof. I could still get infected. So I still want to be injected with something that will make serum antibodies so they'll be there to protect me from getting severe symptoms. Huh. Okay, it's your choice to do that to yourself or your child, but just know that most clinical trials are more concerned about measuring the serum antibody titers after these injections and less concerned about symptom prevention. Any protection against disease symptoms is assumed because antibodies get made. The trials are never long enough to determine long-term protection of severe disease symptoms or mortality. The data for whether or not they protect from disease symptoms is buried in the post-marketing surveillance that happens to you, the consumer, long after the shots get approved by the FDA and then recommended by the CDC. That's true of all shots called vaccines, but let's walk through exactly what happens when you inject yourself or your child with these COVID mRNA shots. Usually, a shot called a vaccine has a foreign protein in it that directly stimulates antibody production, but mRNA shots don't do that, which is the main reason why they are technically not vaccines. The mRNA uses your cells to make the proteins that will ultimately end up creating antibody production. But it takes several steps, and all of them have consequences. So let's go through those steps. First, you got to get that mRNA into your cells, and that's done with little fat bubbles called lipid nanoparticles that protect the mRNA. Fat bubbles tend to stick together, just like you see happening here on this electron microscope image. So they use polyethylene glycol to keep them separated. The person pushing the plunger on that syringe is instructed 3 times to make sure those fat bubbles are not sticking together before they shove them into you. So if you didn't get injected with coagulating goo that formed an embolism and killed you with a heart attack or a stroke, those fat bubbles will merge with cells of your body naturally because cell membranes are made of lipids too, and then the mRNA goes right inside. What cells? Mostly the cells that line your blood vessels, because that's exactly where this stuff goes. The needle will break capillaries, and because of simple fluid mechanics, the injected particles will always get into the vascular system. Mostly the venous side, because it has less pressure. The veins in the upper arm where they jab you will collect them and deliver them through the vena cava into the heart and lungs first, then back to the heart and out to major arteries supplying your entire body. So you've injected yourself with hundreds of billions of these little tiny fat bubbles, each one capable of delivering mRNA into cells that line your blood vessels all along the way. As soon as that mRNA gets into those cells lining your vessels, ribosomes will use it to chain amino acids together to make the protein it codes for. But that's not the whole story. As amino acids start chaining together to make the protein, parts of those proteins called peptides are displayed on the surfaces of those endothelial cells on what are called class 1 MHC molecules. And when cytotoxic T cells detect those peptides as foreign, they will destroy those cells before that protein even gets made. This causes tissue damage in your vessel walls that is repaired with fibrin. Because you've injected yourself with billions of these particles, the damage becomes widespread. The fibrin clots start cross-linking, cover large areas, and do not get dissolved, explaining the large calamari-like clots that are being pulled out of cadavers, and even some people that are still alive. If you want to do that to yourself, go right ahead. Also, because you've injected billions of these particles, there is no way for cytotoxic T cells to kill all the cells that are making that protein. So the protein does get made and released so you can get those precious antibodies you want. How long does it take to get those antibodies? Generally about 2 weeks. So what happens to those proteins in the meantime? Well, they're biologically active proteins, meaning that they will attach to the exact same cellular receptors that the virus would use. Now you've really pissed off your immune system, causing neutrophils to attack and destroy the cells that the proteins are attached to. This causes even more inflammation and tissue damage that can start affecting organ tissues and nerve tissues, explaining all the neurological and other systemic adverse reactions that they knew could happen and do happen, as evidenced in post-marketing surveillance. If you're lucky enough to make it through all of that without any serious, long-lasting adverse reactions, you've got your precious serum antibodies. But what are those antibodies targeting? The protein that was coded for by the mRNA that you just got injected with, not what's currently mutating in the environment. So what you've done is load yourself with suboptimal, highly specific antibodies that will attach to the mutated protein in a way that can make your symptoms worse by invoking antibody-dependent enhancement mechanisms. Antibody-dependent enhancement, or ADE, can be better understood by watching this video on Rumble. When you understand how stupid, dangerous, and foolish injecting yourself with mRNA is, you'll never do it to yourself or your children again. That's the easy part. The hard part is educating the masses so they see it too. The even harder part is to lose the fear of natural infections. Do not be afraid. You have God given immune cells and barriers that protect you from infectious diseases, even ones that come out of a laboratory. If this were not so, humans would have been extinct a long time ago. The protective cells and barriers are yours, and you can make them strong with a healthy diet, exercise, and sunshine. If the barriers fail and symptoms develop, they can be easily managed with supportive care. This is all fear driven. If people continue to be fearful and ignorant, there will always be a demand for these products, and they will stay on the market regardless of how dangerous the products are. The solution is education because human instinct is to fear what is not understood. Many of us are already educated on the power of natural immunity. We understand it, have no fear, and are demanding the banning of mRNA products. But will this ever happen? Several states have successfully banned mandates on the administration of these products, and that's a step in the right direction. But what would it take for the product itself to be banned and pulled from the market? The Secretary of HHS cannot do it alone, but the FDA, under his recommendation or the recommendation of CBER, the Center for Biologics Evaluations and Research, could suspend the BLA or the Biological Licensing Agreement to make the product. This has happened in the past with the RotaShield vaccine made by Wyeth in 1999 due to a deadly adverse reaction recognized by the FDA. If the FDA officially recognizes deadly side effects of mRNA injections, BLAs could be suspended, but that's a big if. The vaccine manufacturer can also voluntarily suspend its own BLA. This most notably happened with Limerix, made by GSK in 2002 over low demand and fear of lawsuits concerning autoimmune arthritis. GSK was afraid of lawsuits because Limerix was not on the childhood immunization schedule that gives blanket liability protection to the manufacturers of those vaccines. We need to make vaccine manufacturers afraid of lawsuits again. Continue to pressure legislators to remove the blanket liability protection that was given to them. When that protection is removed, vaccine manufacturers will most likely voluntarily stop making the products, and doctors and pharmacists would be afraid to administer them anyway because the lawsuits would be too expensive. Also, we can continue to educate others, helping them to understand how immunity works and why these products don't work, so the demand for these products will continue to drop. The truth isn't always comfortable, but when we have the courage to make it known to those who cannot see it, the paradigm will shift. As always, thanks for watching and thanks for staying smart.